Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're all well. I fancy doing some indoor modelling rather than going down the log cabin, so I've been cracking on with a couple of projects. Now, something I bought probably a year or so ago now is a 5-car Class 180 set of 3D prints by Cmac Model Railways. These are, as I say, 3D resin printed. They are just the body shells, so I did purchase a Bachmann Voyager as a donor chassis and went ahead modifying that to fit. But that's been on the back burner now for about a year, if not more. Recently, I've also from CMAC purchased an Electra Star kit, a Royal Mail 325 kit, and I had already purchased before, along with the 180, a 378 London Overground kit, which again has been on the back burner. But I thought I'd just show you some progress on them, where I'm up to. Because now I've got the 325 and the Electra Star, it really sort of gave me a kick up the backside to get on with these projects and make some progress. So I know we've jumped ahead a lot here, however I thought I'd show you before I've completely finished them all. So you can see I've got the 5-car 180 here, 4-car 378 and a 4-car 325 set. And like I say, I've also got an Electra Star, a 387 down in the cabin that I'll have to do at some point. The 325 is pretty much done. The 378 is almost there. I've got a few touch-ups and stuff to do because unfortunately, if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen that I smashed this one up by mistake. I actually dropped it and it snapped. This is one of the disadvantages of 3D printing. However, I'm not surprised it snapped because I dropped it in the kitchen on a tiled floor, so there's obviously no give. If I dropped it on the carpet, it'd probably be fine. The 180, as I say, I've had the 180 the longest, an awfully long time, even longer than the 378. So it's about time I cracked on. But yeah, to give you a bit of a close-up, the 325 is obviously what I'm happiest with. The driving cars look ace. As I say, they're fully painted now. I try and put it in the light a bit. Bear in mind, it's quite a warm light because it's just a lamp that I've got next to me here. So bear that in mind. It does make the paint look slightly orange, but it is the right shade. It's a nice DB red. But yeah, you can see it there with the yellow fronts. Nice 3D printed details. There's a couple little bits missing. Oh, hello, cat. Because these were actually NQP prints of Charlie from CMAC, so not quite perfect. So they had a couple little imperfections, mainly on the front end. So I picked them up a bit cheaper, hence doing this project, because I'm in an arent, and then these came up, so I thought, why not? But you can see they also come with a chassis, which on the driving cars actually fits really nicely. It's got that nice underframe detail. I have got bogies as well, 3D printed bogies, which I need to get some brass bearings for and some wheel sets. But you can see for now, they've come together really nice. They look really smart. So as I say, these are painted in DB red with yellow fronts, which are actually Fiat golden yellow. I always paint the yellow fronts with Halford's car paint just because it covers so much better. With acrylics, you'll be there for a week trying to get enough coats on it and it'll just not look as good. This is just so much easier. To start off with, I actually grey primed the whole thing with Halford's paint. I find that the best option. It really covers well. But yeah, so DB red sides in acrylic, Fiat golden yellow for the front end. The black is all actually hand painted. I don't even mask it usually. So you can see I'm sort of getting the hang with freehand painting by now. As well as the inners of the headlamps and the buffer beams and stuff. I say it's all hand painted. The roof is a grey acrylic paint that I've got. I can't actually remember off the top of my head, but it's an old like Warhammer paint that I had lying around. I wanted to try it out, so I've used it on these. However, it's pretty similar to Halford's grey primer, which is what I actually reverted to on the 378. That is just Halford's grey primer with some gloss lacquer over it, and you can see you would never know. But that is pretty much bang on colour-wise for what I wanted. So in future, I'll probably use that for this sort of shade. But this isn't far off, it's a tad darker. But basically, I had the paint, wanted to use it up. For the cant lines, I actually cheat on these. I don't paint them, and I don't use transfers. I use these. These are actually stickers. I get them off eBay. You might have noticed on a lot of my stuff that I repaint, even other stuff that I update, such as my Dapper Western, it has got cam rail lines, and they're always nice and neat, and that's because I use these. They are complete stickers, so you literally just stick them on. There's no faffing, and you can peel them back off and replace them. Unlike transfers, where if you use transfers for this sort of stuff, they don't go over little bumps and stuff and in crevices. And if you try and pull them about, they will snap. These are worth their weight in gold. From Model Transport Graphics or something like that, I'll try and put a link, not a link, sorry, I'll put a screenshot to their eBay page up so you can see where they're from, because they're really helpful. The only drawback is this is the smallest they can print, and not that I really notice, but they are very slightly wider than they should be. But in the grand scheme of things, I think you'll agree that they don't look bad at all, and you'll never really tell the difference. But they just make it so much easier, honestly. I would definitely recommend getting some of these. But yeah, so that's it for those, really. Gloss lacquered over the top once the paint, I was happy with it all. Then after gloss lacquering, I've used Fox transfers for the Royal Mail decals. Sadly, it's the old style transfer pack where they've got the gold sort of lining going up. They've got sort of two parallel lines running along the body shell. And on the cabs, it goes up in a sort of angle. However, I want to use the more modern sort of livery where they've taken that off. The drawback is Fox don't include the Royal Mail website logo, which goes underneath. I'm in two minds really whether to bother actually commissioning someone to do it for me, or just go with it as it is. I'm not too fussed, so I might just leave it. But the rest of them, really good quality. What I'm most impressed with these, this is my first time using Fox. Look at them in the light. There's no carrier film that you can see. Once you get them on there and lacquer them, it's completely invisible. I'm really impressed with that, so I probably will use them in future, even though they can be quite expensive. But after trying them out on these, you can see there with the ER logo, it's 100% worth it. I've used other manufacturers in the past, but they do leave a film behind and it's visible in certain lights, which annoys me a bit. But yeah, moving on from that, the 378, pretty cool, as you can see. We've got this. This is the one that you might have seen on my Instagram. I painted it probably 9 months to a year ago, something like that. I painted the black by hand. I painted the orange by hand as well. And then basically just got it sort of looking okay and then left it at that. I didn't paint the other three at the same time, which was a big mistake on my part. The only bit that I had done was the white and the blue. So since then, I've had to paint the other three, which I did. The cat's on a mad one, ignore him. I painted those completely airbrushed, so the black looked a lot nicer. The orange came out a lot nicer. And then basically I put them up against this one, and this one didn't quite look as good, so I've had to go back and repaint this. Hence you'll see I've not quite finished it yet. I've got to put the black around the door edges and the sills. But yeah, it's not too bad now. So hopefully they'll match up nice. The only problem with these is Charlie from Cmac hasn't done the chassis for them yet, which is another reason they kind of went on the back burner. I was going to shorten some Turbo Star chassis and use those, but I don't really think it'll look right, so I'm going to wait. So yeah, I'm going to get these all painted up and finished, and then they're going to sit there until the chassis is developed for them. You'll notice this has a pantograph. I ordered 2 Hornby Class 91 pantograph sets for this, and the 325. The 325 obviously I've not fitted yet. You can see the pantograph well there. For this one, I spent a little bit of time fitting it the other day. I went off a picture. Luckily, someone had taken a photo from a bridge of one of these, so you can see the pan quite well. They are plastic, but I'm not overly fussed. It looks all right. But if I can sort of zoom in, I think you'll agree it looks pretty good. As I say, I followed a photo and used the parts as best I could to replicate that. Hence, you've got this bit coming out of the roof. This should be an insulator, which is one of these looking things. However, these are a bit too fat to actually fit in. So I've just used this little sort of discarded piece of plastic which came in the kit. I don't know what it actually is meant to represent, but I think it looks all right, gives a nice effect. The only thing I could do with is putting a high voltage cable down this side and linking up this side of the pan. That's there and present on the photo, but realistically, am I bothered? No. As long as it's got a representation of a pantograph, I'm not overly fussed. But the only other thing I like to do is, I think on these 3D prints, the pantograph well isn't quite deep enough. So I've had to cut down the insulator pots to make it all sit lower down. because otherwise it sat proud of the roof when it was in the down position. And you'll agree there that that looks about right. So I'm pleased with how it came out, and I would definitely use one of those ones in the future. I'm looking forward to getting that one done. Now, the 180 is the big one that I wanted to get done. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I used to work on these at Old Oak Common. They were my sort of bread and butter day job. So I had a bit of a sort of thing for these. I know there's a lot of memes and they're not the most well-loved unit. However, when they work, they're a brilliant bit of kit. It's just a shame there's so many design flaws with them. But as for the model, this is one of the first edition Cmac prints. After he did these, I got him some photos because there's no horn grills on the model. So if you get a later release of these 3D prints, which he does nowadays, you will get the horn grills in there because there's a little cutout in the cab roof, and there's also a cab aircon that's missing on my one, hence it looks a bit flat and bare. But a lot of people won't notice it. I probably shouldn't have told you, but there we go. I'm not too fussed really. At the end of the day, the Revolution one's coming out. It got announced after I'd finished painting all of these. But yeah, you can't win them all. Onto the subject of paint, this is the only one I've got left which is just pure painted. So I painted this up. I think it looks pretty good, to be fair. This is done with, I think it's, trying to remember now, it's a Capri Blue or something like that. It's a Halfords paint, and the front again, Fiat Gold and Yellow. The top is Rover something grey, can't remember the name now, but it doesn't really matter. However, the blue is a little bit on the light side if you compare it to other releases of First Great Western stuff. The main problem was, though, I couldn't find any transfers. You'll notice what I've got here. These are vinyls from Electra Rail Graphics. I tried and tried and tried to get people to do these transfers for me, but everyone just kept telling me they're impossible, even though I believe I've seen Railtech do First Great Western local line delivery, which is similar sort of thing to this, but this would mean doing the artwork all again. No one really wanted to entertain it for a one-off model. I kind of understand, but it was frustrating. So I went to Adam at Electra, Adam War. I don't know if you've heard of him. Nice enough chap. Yeah, he runs Electra Railway Graphics, which do vinyls. Now, I don't know if you know, but a lot of trains in real life are actually vinyl, so it's kind of fitting, really. So I basically sent him a DM car and a trailer, and he then created the vinyls for that. And then obviously sent me it back with a set. So there we go. The only difference with my set compared to if you order some yourself is that I specifically asked not to have the window cutouts, just so it's a solid body side. It makes it a lot harder to fit. However, I'm very picky with this sort of stuff. So if any of the windows don't line up and stuff, it's something that I'll always notice. So what I do instead is I will fit this to the body side. Then I will go around and I'll cut around the window frames, which you can see is what I've done on these ones here. So I'll cut around the window frames because I don't want any raised detail on the model, because that will potentially mean that the vinyl will sort of pop up and bubble. So I want it to be as flat as I possibly can get it. Including that, I've also taken the roof gutter strips off, just so, again, it's flat as can be. See it? I want it basically like that, just so you can't feel it, but it just gives the vinyl the flattest surface possible. So yeah, cut around the window frames, leaving the frames protruding, which will obviously leave you with a bit of a funny looking body side. You can see the frames are a completely different colour, but as you can see on the one in front, I mixed up some blue and went around and painted the frames in individually, as well as any little nicks in the vinyl from my poor fitting work. The problem that I had is I vinyled one of these cars, which is this one, probably about 6 months ago, maybe more than that now actually. And I vinyled it and then satin lacquered over the top of it to try and seal the vinyl in. And I basically left it all that time to see how it would stand the test of time. Now, initially it looked very good. However, when I just got it out again last week to start doing this again, I noticed some of the vinyl had started raising in the corners and there's little bits that were flaking. So what I've done this time is I've peeled some of the vinyl back in certain areas, and I've actually used, very sparingly, some Rocket Rapid around the very edges on the bad areas. So basically I've gone down the side here, I've gone right down the bottom here. I've gone along the top of the back edge there, along the bottom of the doors and around that door window frame, because that sort of protrudes slightly. And I've just done that on each model now, just to try and help keep them down. And that seems to be a lot better now. But yeah, I've got to say thank you to Adam for sorting the 180 vinyls out for me. He also did me some Chiltern stuff, which is going to go on my Bachmann 168s and a 165 that I've got as a donor. So that'll look pretty good, but I'll do the same process. I basically want to try and get it so that you can't really tell it's vinyls. So I am going to weather this all up. You can see here where I've cut out the vinyl where this step is, because again, this lifted. Rather than go in, I could go in and glue all this, but rather than do that, I thought I'll gently cut around it, nice and neat. And then by the time I come in here with some sleeper grime weathering with the airbrush, you'd never notice anyway. So yeah, I'll do basically what I've done with the window frames. You can see it's matched pretty well, but like I say, by the time it's weathered, you won't know. But yeah, as I say, it's all on a Voyager underframe. If I just pull this one off, it's just a chopped down Voyager. The bodies themselves are pretty basic. There's some little tabs that I had to cut off to make these chassis fit. And the only other thing is I had to take the bogies out, and they've got little tabs that you have to cut off to stop it tilting. The underframes, you get these as well, but you have to cut the Voyager underframe off. I did this very crudely, just this one, just to see how it'd look. I've got to go in now and do all the rest. But nowadays I've got a nice multi-tool, which you've probably seen me use in other videos. So I'll use that to basically make a slit down and cut this side completely off. I'll fit the chassis under the body and then basically glue the side panel on. And it should look all right. So there you go, and there's this side vinyled. You can see what I mean about the windows. So you can see they just sort of stick up. So I'll go round basically with a fingernail, just go around the edges of the windows like that. And then I'll go down them with that sharp blade. But what I do initially is, you see on the vinyl where the number is in the can line, in the center, because these are very tight on the body, the number just fits on where that little lip is in the body, you can see. So I just cut that little bit off initially, just that little part. And then I also cut a little bit off right on the cant line. I just do probably about that much of it. And then that helps me line it up initially in the center, up and down. And then I go along and I line the bottom of the vinyl up just so it overlaps with the bottom of this. And then on the front, much the same. On the front, as I was saying earlier, you have got to manipulate the vinyl a bit to go around this front valance. If you just stuck it straight down, the yellow would go across, but the blue, it just comes down and leaves a bit of a gap. So you've just got to try and stretch it around. That's another reason why the glue is so essential. So basically put the glue along that edge, along this edge, and a little bit up here, as well as all the way down the side where the window frame is and up to here, and just in that little corner piece. And that just stops it sort of rolling back up, if you like. Being vinyl, you're never going to get it quite perfect, but it's pretty much as good as it's going to get. And if I go along after, it's a little advantage of the cant line stickers I was talking about earlier. If I go along after with that, because it's a little bit thicker, it will straighten this up. And then where it is curved here anyway, it needs to go across the top of the roof, so that doesn't matter. But yeah, I think that looks pretty good. As I say, I'll have to cut the windows out now. You can see I've cut the bottom parts out where it overlaps, because otherwise it will just end up peeling. So I've just basically scored it and then gone along with the Stanley blade. And I'll do the same thing as I would with the window frames. I'll come along and just paint this in a slightly darker blue to match the vinyl. And then by the time I lacquer it all and then weather it up after with some frame dirt or whatever I use, sleeper grime, blah blah blah, that will all tie in nice. But yeah, I mean, I know it's not going to be the most detailed 180 in the world, but as it's whizzing past you, you're not going to notice. So I've vinyled all of them now. This is the one I was showing you earlier, that DM car. You can see there the vinyl is all on there. It's all lined up as I wanted it. I've painted these underneath bits that you could see were light blue earlier. I've still got to do the window frames and do the roof, just where the line of the vinyl meets the roof. You can see I've been doing this one. It doesn't have to be perfect along the roof. I've done the window frames. You can see the difference. Here's a before and after on one of them. So this is what they all look like usually, because I'm a bit of a sort of messy one. You can see all the bits where the vinyl isn't covering, and we've got some bare plastic there. So again, that'll all be covered up, much like the top one is. It'll basically look like that. I've gone along the roof as well. You can see it doesn't have to be perfect again, because I'm going to use those cant line stickers to go across this, so that will bring the cant line out again nicely, and again it'll be a little bit wider, so it'll also help with any not quite perfectly straight areas and stuff like that. The roof, where it meets the roof ribs, obviously isn't the neatest it could possibly be, but I am going to weather these up, so it probably won't be noticeable by the time it's done. But you can see the difference there between inside the windows and the window frames. Although you'll never quite get the paint to perfectly match, it's not too bad. And I think once it's all gloss lacquered and stuff, it's going to look all right. But yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. I don't think it's going to look too bad when it's whizzing around the layout. So I'm going to crack on and do the rest. I'll paint all the rest of the window frames, do that, and then I'll do the cant line, and then we'll have a look at how it sort of comes out. Well, 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 would you look at that? And there we have a 5-car Class 180. So it's obviously very glossy at the minute, because it is just gloss lacquered, and we're missing a bogey frame or two, but obviously they're the incorrect ones anyway, so I've got to change those at some point. But it's come out very, very nice. I mean, obviously with the vinyls, you're gonna notice little bits here and there where I've chopped and changed stuff, and I've not quite cut the windows out perfectly, and had to do little touch-ups, things like that. But on the whole, I'm really pleased. When this is going round, you can't really tell any different, apart from the fact that it's very shiny at the minute. Even on the roof, so on top of the cant line, that is painted just so that it blends in with the roof better, because obviously on the edge of the vinyl you get a white line, so that's why that's all painted. That's a bit of glue that I spilt on it a long time ago, so we'll ignore that. The coach ends again are paint, so I vinyled up to the edge, and then I basically got a really sharp scalpel, and I kind of dragged it along the edge of the vinyl to sort of almost kind of sand it down in effect, but it kind of gave it a nice sort of soft end to the vinyl, if you like. And then I just used a bit of paint to go over. I mean, you can just about see the colour change, but again, when I weather that, you're not really going to notice it, so I don't think it's come out too bad. Obviously we need to do glazing at some point, but the reason I'm not doing any glazing is because this is a 3D printed model. There's no glazing out there that exists. So what I'm going to do is use epoxy resin, and basically I'm going to have the coaches on their side. I'm going to use clear Gorilla tape on the inside, and then the window frames I will fill with epoxy resin. So obviously once they're in, they're in. So what I'm going to do is, now that I'm happy this is all together and runs, I'm going to take this back in the house and I'm going to weather it up. Then I'll have to satin varnish it. And once I'm happy with how it looks and it's completely 100% finished, the last thing I'll do is the glazing, so that I basically never have to touch it again once it's glazed. That's the general idea anyway. Whether it goes to plan or not, I don't know. But yeah, it looks really good. You can see the cant lines all on there. Again, that's those stickers that I use. Obviously I've got to put lights and stuff like that in it when I get round to it. But yeah, it's nice. This is the first time it's been all in one piece on my track since I've owned it. As I say, I've had this sitting on the sidelines for probably over a year now, so it's really nice to have it in one piece. And as you can see there, it looks absolutely brilliant. Well, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't pleased with that. Obviously it's running pretty well, it looks alright. Now I suppose I better take it back in the house, get some weathering on it, and then I can start looking at doing the glazing. So that's the 180 back in one piece after some weathering and satin varnish. Now when I did weather it, it's probably the light that I did it in because I did it at night in the kitchen. I thought that I went way too overboard with this because I sprayed quite a lot of brown over the body sides on the bottom, sort of along where the bottom of the valance is and along this edge, and then quite a bit on the edges of the cars. You can kind of just about see it. It's sort of in this area here where you've got that little concave section. And I thought it was really heavy, but when I came down in the morning, I obviously picked it up, satin varnished them all, and then let them dry. Came back and you can't really notice it. I mean, if you look very closely, you can see a little bit, like you can see down the bottom of the valance there, a little sort of tinge of brown. But yeah, I might have to give them another pass, to be honest. I did weather the yellow fronts. I sprayed those and I wasn't happy with it. So I got some IPA and a little rag and I took it off, which does have the effect of leaving a couple little bits of dirt here and there. And obviously it's got a bit of dirt inside the seams and stuff like that, which is a bit better. But I might, like I say, go over it again. The roof is a bit dirty. You can kind of get the impression. And down the ends there where the vents are, that's where the exhausts are on the real thing. So naturally I've put a bit of soot there, and just as if it's picked up where any raised areas are. But like I say, you can't really tell, so I might have to come over with a bit of light brown, just because that'll be a bit more obvious, and then give it another little tiny coat before, again, I go ahead and do the glazing. But aside from that, I'm really pleased with how this is looking. So moving on from the 180, we'll go and have a look at the 325, and you can see that that's looking pretty good. So I've chucked some soot over that, but that is a lot more noticeable than how the 180 came out, strangely. But I'm really pleased with this. So if you look at photos of these, the front end above the cab is always filthy. I've put a little bit on the front sort of valance areas. Don't know how well it sort of picks up on the camera because of the lighting in here. And then there's some dirt on the roof. You can see where the vents are. I've just picked those out. I've gone along the cant lines and I've gone along the bottom of the body, not that you can see it too well. And then where the cars meet, you can see there that there's a little bit of dirt brushed in, just starting to encroach on the body sides. I've not obviously weathered any of these chassis yet because I'm not 100% sure the route I'm going down with the chassis. However, you can see from the video that I have sorted the bogies out. The bogies are painted now black. So I've just got to get some 10mm, I believe, pinpoint wheels, and I've got some brass top hat bearings somewhere that I'll probably chuck in them. And from there, hopefully we'll be able to get this thing rolling. But the fun bit after that is going to be trying to decide how I couple them up. I've got no idea what I'm going to do. But yeah, I'm really pleased with how the 325 is looking. I think it looks tip top, and super happy with that. So this is the 365 motor chassis. You see I've got a 158 motor fitted there now. It's screwed through the floor, as you can see. I've made a couple of little holes for the screws and screwdriver access. That sort of works. It's just screwed into the motor sort of holder. And then I've now got to cut the hole for the motor bogie itself, and then I'll have to use some plasticard to create the top sort of tower piece for the motor to actually screw into so it's the right height. So I'll do that out of plasticard. But to cut this out, because it's resin, it's very brittle, I'm actually going to chain drill it. So that means taking a small drill bit. I'll probably use like a 1.5mm drill bit or something like that. And I'll basically go along, drill all the way around. So do a million holes. And then basically, once that's done, I'll probably go along and score it with a Stanley or something like that. Or just keep trying to sort of go at it with the drill until it all comes out. Because otherwise, if you just try and cut this, it will just snap. So don't even bother trying. So I'm just messing around trying to get the bogies mounted on this motor chassis. You can see here I've got the motor mounted. Can't remember if I showed it in the previous bit of video. And I've also cut out this funny shaped hole, which basically allows the bogie to swing fully and not touch anything. The little sort of nub out of it there is to allow the drive shaft to go through, if I don't drop everything on the floor. What I've then done is made this little motor mount. So that's out of plasticard. So this is basically one little sheet of plasticard with the right size hole drilled through it, and then a little sort of triangle piece at the bottom, which is because on the motor bogie, I don't know if you can see that well, but it's got a little tab that sticks out that stops it pivoting too far. So basically, if I chuck this on there, you'll see if I move it side to side, it'll stop. So that's the max it'll go. And you just want to make sure as well that this plastic that you use, I happen to have the right size. I can't remember what size it is off the top of my head, hence I'm not telling you. But you've got to make sure that the top of the casting for the motor bogie just sits proud. The buyer literally sort of talking a Rizzler paper, not that I smoke. That's because when you screw your little fitting screw down tight, you want this to still be loose enough where it can swivel and has a tiny bit of side by side slash front to back play. So yeah, did that, and then I've got two more little strips, and I've basically stuck them to the underneath like so. That will then sit, once I get the position right, that will then sit on the power chassis like so, and that will hopefully be the right distance, the right spacing for the motor bogie to sit at the correct height. Obviously you can go ahead and file this down as needed, which is what I've been doing, hence there's mess everywhere and there's shavings and stuff. But yeah, so I fitted 10.5mm wheels to the trailing bogie, which is the other one for this chassis. The bogie frames are printed so that you require little brass top hat bearings, otherwise the axles will just fall out. So these ones have got the bearings in, and the wheels fit in there nice. There's a tiny little bit of side-by-side play in there, which is what you want, so they're about perfect. Obviously this is a 158 motor bogie, so you will notice I have chopped the 158 pieces off, and I've chopped them off flush. As you can see, there's nothing sticking out the bottom there. So chop them off flush. That should leave you with this little bit sticking out here. And then what you want to do is the spare bogie that you've got for the 325, you want to very carefully cut through about 3/4 of the way up one of the airbags, and then you want to probably sand it down a little bit, and you will then be left with this. You see this sort of flat edge, I don't know if it will focus. You've got this sort of flat edge in here that will basically butt up against that, so you run a bit of glue along there. And then I've worked it out by putting obviously it next to this bogie, that if you glue it and butt it up to there, it will actually leave you with pretty much the bang on perfect bogie height compared to the trailer. So I put that at end as well. You can see, pretty pleased with that. So that's going to be about perfect. Obviously it's only a small little bit of glue that I've used, so you can see the way it's sort of attached there. So what I'll do is I'll get some epoxy resin and probably a cocktail stick and run it down the edges on that side and try and get in there underneath the airbag, and then probably around the corners and stuff like that. And that will just obviously strengthen that up, because at the minute, being only a thin bead of super glue, if I sort of squeeze it or knock it too much, it's probably going to break away. So you just want to find a way of strengthening that up. But yeah, for now that's going to look pretty good. So I'm going to get that other side on now. Obviously throw these away, get that cut down, get this side on, and then we'll assemble it and see how it sits. So there's the 325 then on its wheels on the layout. Obviously I've got to now sort out some sort of way of coupling it up together. Not 100% sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but I've got plenty of other things to get on with in the meantime, so this is probably going to have to sit here for a little bit while I fix some other stuff. I've got to obviously glaze it as well, which is no problem, and I'll put some lights in. But for now, I think that's looking really good, especially with the 180 behind it. So I've got to say, Charlie of Cmac, spot on, mate. Hats off to you. I think I mentioned it before, but it's a Hornby 91 pantograph on this, before I get asked. The motor car sits pretty well height-wise against the rest. So this is the motor bogie you're looking at on the left. I'm pretty happy with that. Again, Bachmann 158 stuff. You can get that on the Bachmann Spares website. So yeah, the world's your oyster, really. Go ahead and build one. So there they are then, both up and running. It's been a long time coming, especially for the 180. The 325 I'm super pleased with. The 180 still needs some fettling. I'm basically disabling the tilt by cutting some little lugs off of the underneath of the chassis and cutting the screw mounts off the bogies, or shortening them so that they don't pivot as much. I've done these two cars so they now don't tilt, but I've just got to fettle them a little bit more just so they run nice and smoothly. This one likes to sort of wobble about as it's going along, like so. So it needs a little bit more. That's just where I've cut the bogies down. I've not lowered them just enough so that when you screw the screws right in, they're allowing a little bit too much free play in the bogies. So again, that's just going to take some trial and error. Then once all that's done, of course, glazing, sort of sound file, and go from there, really. Put some lights in and that sort of stuff. The 325, that runs actually really nicely, especially considering the only pickups on it are the two driven axles. So this is the driven bogie here. This is just currently a trailer. It's actually got no pickups in. So that's why it's been running around at like a decent sort of pace to just make sure it'll keep going, basically. So I'm going to put pickups on these wheels. I'm going to use DCC Concepts 10.5mm wheel sets, double O gauge, of course, with the spring pickups fitted for friction-free sort of running. And then sort of go from there. Of course, I'll have to try and through wire the train because I don't really want to use 3 decoders in this thing. So I'll try and put some wires through the centres to allow the lighting to work front and rear. Maybe a cab light each end as well if we're lucky. I'm not sure if I'll do the illuminated blue lights because you sometimes do, sometimes don't see them running with them on. And it just depends how far I want to go, really. To couple this up, obviously, being in mind this is a completely Cmac model, unlike this, which is a Voyager chassis. This I've used KD number 29s, which are these, kindly recommended to me by Danny, various multiple units, if you follow him. So if I just take one off, well, if I take this one off, the only trouble is the bogies have got no retaining method at the minute. So if I lift this, the bogies will fall out if I don't lift it like this. But you can see the couplings here. So they are a cranked sort of coupling so that they can move left and right to allow you a bit of play, and obviously KD as you'd expect. So you've got the nice Buckeye sort of action. So easy to take apart and put together. You'll notice that I've glued them to the underside of the body at the minute. I did that because I wanted to get them all in position, test that they worked in this position because they're quite close together. And then once that's done, I will screw them in so that they're a bit more permanent, because I don't want to be running it. If I take it somewhere else, for example, I don't want it to be halfway around a layout and a coupling fall off. I might just open up the gap slightly, and you can see there the gap isn't too bad. It's quite nice actually compared to other stuff. But I might just open them up because this is obviously on the outside of my layout and it's minimum roughly radius 3. If I put it on the inside, I think they'll cause problems, just because on the outside the tightest curve is up the other end going underneath brake spear. And these cars, because of the play in KD couplings, you can see they've got quite a bit in them really, because they are naturally a bit of a loose fit. The edges of these cars just about touch. So I think on a radius 2, which I do actually have on this layout, I think that would cause problems. There's a few little things I need to tweak, such as the bogies. I need to just fettle them about so it runs a bit nicer, although it does run nice and smooth as it is. Sort out a bogie retaining method, sort out some windscreens and lighting, and then we'll be good to go. So they're running away quite happily now in the background. It's been a bit of a long-winded video, so I'm going to leave the glazing and finishing off for next time. So I'd just like to say thank you for watching this video. Hope you've enjoyed it, maybe got some tips for your own stuff, and hope to see you again in the next one. Please subscribe, chuck a like on the video, comment down below if you wish. I'll see you next time. Cheers.